Oh hey, it's Dread.
Metroid Dread feels like a really long time ago. It's weird because it hasn't even been a year since its release, but I think we are all aware how weird the world is right now. Despite that, there's this really weird sense of dread currently occurring with the Metroid franchise. Metroid Prime 4 hasn't been seen at all except for its initial teaser, and at that time was being developed by Namco. We received an update nearly 4 years ago stating that it wasn't meeting Nintendo's quality standards and had shifted to Retro Studios, who made the original trilogy. We don't know the future of the series other than this game, and it's currently in development hell. Getting straight to the point, Metroid Dread's success should easily usher in the renaissance for the series. The real question is whether Nintendo sees Dread as the new age Metroid fusion to dawn in the next golden age, or do they see it as a one-off? Let me explain that quickly. Super Metroid released in 1994. The series went dark for 8 long years until the release of Metroid Fusion on November 17, 2002. Fusion was followed the very next day by Metroid Prime, and these two games are what started Metroid's renaissance. Anyway, Dread sales numbers would dictate that we should get more, but regardless of those or critical acclaim, Nintendo has proven it doesn't see Metroid as one of its treasured IPs. Prior to Dread, there hasn't been an original, and let me emphasize that, there hasn't been an original Metroid entry that's been universally praised since Metroid Prime 3 way back in 2007. Metroid's 30th anniversary came and went with zero news or announcements, and they sent a cease and desist to the creators of the fan-made AM2R or Metroid 2 remake. The fact that Metroid Dread was even announced came as a massive shock for the gaming world. Let's think about this for a second. This is a really easy fucking premise to capitalize on. Space, alien life forms, and a cool protagonist. It's not like anyone else has tried and succeeded with this model before. The main difference with Metroid is the addition of incredibly unique weapons and power-ups, along with a heavy emphasis on isolation and exploration. What unfair advantage does Metroid have against its competitors? Well, considering the genre of Metroidvania is named after it, yeah, it's one of the godfathers. Where those other popular franchises are grand epics, Metroid is almost always a more intimate and self-contained experience. I find it to be more relatable in this fashion as well. The universe is a giant fucking place, so the isolation and loneliness feels right. I'm not a proponent of milking franchises because if you do it too much, you end up with garbage. But I'm also not a fan of letting an incredible franchise stagnate because you're unwilling to go forward. I mean, for fuck's sake, like we touched on earlier, the 30th anniversary for Metroid was filled with absolutely nothing. It's worrisome that Metroid Dread has a vacuum of space behind it and an apparent vacuum of space in front of it. Honestly, I've got a sense of dread. Okay, I'm done. But seriously, there's some bad juju around Metroid Prime 4. I don't know if Retro still has the chops for it. Let's look at Metroid Prime 1 and 3. Let me also mention that despite me stating earlier that Metroid Prime 3 came out to critical acclaim, I think it's weaker than the first 2 games in that trilogy, and the critical consensus agrees. I just think it's much weaker than 3 points worth. Nintendo hasn't been known for cutting-edge graphics since the leap to 3D was made way back in the 90s, but Metroid Prime is easily my pick for the best-looking game of that generation. Retro Studios put the game together with duct tape and bubblegum by most accounts, but they created a wonderful atmosphere and a story that was deep. Well, if you chose to dive into the lore with the scan visor. The gameplay was diverse and fantastic. The graphical fidelity still stands out, and if you emulate the game today, it looks crisp. Following the GameCube, Nintendo's future consoles would focus on gimmicky bullshit instead of hardware spec, which isn't an issue, but when you have the best looking game of a console generation, you don't want to see it stagnate. Metroid Prime 3 stagnated. Retro sacrificed the choice and variety to ensure the game could work with the Wii's motion controls. For example, instead of 4 different beams paired with 4 specialty attacks, you get one beam that changes as you progress, and you can't choose anything different. It stacks, much like older Metroid games, but it feels lazy in the name of the gimmick motion controls. The most insulting of these is the plasma beam. In Metroid Prime, your beam cannon extends and takes on a molten look. I mean, look at this shit. You are literally incinerating motherfuckers here. It's so satisfying. It's like you have the power of a volcano erupting from your arm. In Metroid Prime 3, it's a basic-ass orange beam that comes off more like a neon light show. For a beam that just rails enemies in nearly every entry of Metroid, this feels like you bought the Spirit Halloween version. This weak gameplay and aesthetic plagues Metroid Prime 3 throughout. The story is also incredibly weak in comparison to the others, but that topic is reserved for its own review of Prime 3. Obviously, there is a new team at the company, but Retro still started the Prime series. They have the pedigree to make another Metroid Prime, but they also have the potential to make another Prime 3. I'm hoping for the former. With the Switch, Nintendo has doubled down on style and mobility for their console. It's a great idea for consumers, and the console has produced some awesome looking games. But is it powerful enough to provide the graphical fidelity that Metroid Prime deserves? There's a certain aesthetic to Prime that evolved into what Prime 3 was, but that was the definite bookend to the trilogy. Now it's time for a fresh start, and what better way to do that than to reset the expectation by increasing the graphical fidelity once again. We all remember how incredible Prime looked from the very beginning, especially once you hit Talon 4. It was shit you didn't see in video games. Rain pattering off the beam, rain hitting your visor, water rushing off your visor, steam fogging up your visor, Samus's reflection showing up, and so much more. Right away, the effects took center stage and the realism was in your face. Why not take a step back towards a more realistic look instead of the dated look the series ended at? And yes, it looked dated even when it came out. I know it's blasphemy, but could you imagine a Prime remake with a studio like Santa Monica or Naughty Dog at the helm? I'm not asking for that kind of fidelity. Well, it'd be pretty badass to see, but an opportunity to capitalize on Dread's success is waning. We don't even have a release window yet. What should have ushered in a new golden age may stagnate once again because Nintendo doesn't treasure this franchise. In some respects, this is okay. You want each entry to be quality, but when you have games in your catalog like Metroid Other M, the potential fears creep in. I would hate to see Metroid Prime 4 be a quality experience, but fail to hit necessary sales numbers because Nintendo failed to strike while the iron was hot. So, are y'all worried like I am? Let me know in the comments.